Well guys, who said you have to spend a lot of money and build a high-end system to have something that looks unique? What I have here today is a build coming in at under 900 bucks, but which you can actually build realistically in a 500 bucks build if you buy used components and you just get the aesthetic and performance stuff which I used over there, which looks better than some custom modded $3,000 PCs, at least in my opinion. And now it's all thanks to components from a brand which a lot of people for some reasons still dislike, but I will keep bringing stuff about them because they're innovating more than more expensive brands. And the brand I'm talking about is MarsGaming. What we have here today is the MarsGaming MC-Orb, and it's basically a circular case where they managed to find the space for 9 fans if you want to fill them all up. And the cool thing is the case is just 130 bucks. Now it is not a cheap case, but what is really cheap is all the other components from MarsGaming. So the fans, they cost under 10 bucks each. So in this case I put 6, I spent 60 bucks. The cooler, it's just 40 bucks and it's pretty good with RGB, etc. And yeah, I also wasted 10 bucks on these RGB tubes for the cooler because I wanted to make it stand out even more. These are also from MarsGaming. And then the power supply, which, listen, MarsGaming, I want to be just clear, they used to make just terrible power supplies. I would never buy the old models, but the new ones, like the MPB3 650, which I have here, they're actually pretty good, and I've been using them for a while. I stress tested them even up to a 4070 Super for this power supply with a Ryzen 7 9700X, all overclocked, and they work fine. They are good. Not very good, but good. They're cheap and you pay very little because they are non-modular, they are just 80 plus bronze, but they do what they promise and they have the wattage which they promise. So the build I have here specifically is a pretty standard build with a very cheap B650MP from MSI, a motherboard which I 100% do not recommend. I think it lacks a lot of features, it doesn't even have an NVMe heatsink, and even the VRM heatsinks are very, very cheap. However, I bought it because it was cheap. And also you need a micro ATX motherboard for this case. It is not a full-size case unfortunately, but I can see why, because it's very crammed inside. So I then got a 9600X Ryzen 5 for the motherboard because it's one of the cheapest CPU. Now if you want to go even cheaper brand new, I would recommend, listen, don't buy this garbage, just buy a B650 from Qingyue on AliExpress. They're good, they're cheap. And then get, if you want really the entry level, maybe the 8400F Ryzen 5. I made a dedicated video on why the cheapest AM5 CPU is actually not too bad if you're gonna pair it with a GPU like what we have here today, which is a 4060. You find the video over there for the 8400F. For the 4060, we got just a simple Zotac white card because it was, again, you guessed it, cheap, and also I wanted some white to sprinkle in a bit of color. I actually regret not getting this case in white or red because they make them in white and red and I think they look even more unique, but I got the black one because I thought it was gonna be easier to match with the components I was gonna get, also because couldn't fit a white motherboard in this budget. For the RAM, we went with some just random XPG stuff. They're cheap, they work, they don't have the best timings, but again, cheap and they work. Same thing for the SSD. If you want something that's not gonna break, go with Kingston. They're basically the most reliable brand at the moment. I'm using mostly them for high-end stuff, and I also have them in my main system. And this is how the PC came about. Now, the gaming performance is exactly what you can expect from a Ryzen 5 and 4060, which means 1080p, high refresh rate, yes, but not so high refresh rate. You're looking at around 240 Hz gaming, 240 FPS. If you're playing the lightest titles like CSGO, CS2 I should say, I still have the habit, Apex Legends, Fortnite, you can do 240 easily. If you undervolt your stuff and you overclock it, like I show on the channel on my guides, you can do 240 very easily. And then for single player titles, you can play any single player title. However, definitely not on maximum details and definitely not with ray tracing unless you want to use DLSS or frame gen, which I really don't like to use because I think like I can really feel the added input lag. So I just play natively usually, or just a little bit of upscaling. But what's interesting is temperature and cooling of all of this, because they can actually all be cooled pretty well. I run some Firestrike, I run CPU-Z, I also run Prime 95 Cinebench, and I will just quickly show you all the benches with all the temperature results. And basically, even though I put all the fans in exhaust because I wanted the best aesthetic looks, Since the case is just open, which we will come to the negatives in a few seconds about that, basically the hot air just goes out, and since we have an all-in-one, it doesn't really matter how the air goes in, because the all-in-one just pushes the air out also, and the GPU is able to basically act as its own intake from the bottom, and then the fans disperse the air. This is also why I did not put the fans directly under the GPU, because I wanted some air to come in from the bottom pretty much. Also because, as you know, cold air is usually on the bottom and hot air is usually on the top. This is basic dynamics of the fluids. Speaking of which, dust is probably going to be a problem with this case. Now, that I haven't tested yet, but I can tell you it's going to get dusty. However, it's also pretty easy to clean overall. Another negative is going to be cable management. Now, it wasn't actually too difficult. We did a build in the MarsGaming MC Edge recently, which was a mess, also because I utilized some custom extensions like those from Reaper cable, which you're gonna see soon on the channel. And if you're gonna use those, they really add up to the case. And if you get a modular power supply, it's gonna be a lot easier. But again, we went non-modular to save money, but it was still doable and it doesn't look too bad on the back. Cool thing is you also have to route in your I/O cables, but the case also has a front USB and front power button, of course. And very strange is the case has some triangular screws for the glass, so you have to use the included Allen key to be able to open them, or you want to be able to. But all in all, I think it looks very unique. The airflow is good, the performance is good. The noise levels are surprisingly low for such an open case. It must have something to do with the way, basically, those things which cover the ventilations are structured. They seem to be working, so I'm pretty happy about them. But I want to hear what you guys think about it down below in the comments as usual. Do you want me to continue making those weird builds, or do you want something more standard? And also let me know if you want to see some used stuff again, because we haven't quite covered the used market, and I think there is quite a lot we can do to get a better value compared to buying 4060 and the 9600X, which is pretty boring. I didn't even run game benchmarks by how boring it is. Let me know down below, and if you watched the video this far, maybe drop a like and subscribe. Bye bye.